Hey guys, gals, Jeff Brown here. Here to talk about a few gotchas with changing out the wheel bearings and the rotors and the axle on a second gen Toyota Sequoia. So a second gen means an '08 to, I don't know, I think '012 or '013. But this is an '012 Sequoia. So I had some shuddering in my brakes, and it was probably just from the lug nuts getting tightened down too much. It was probably me. It was the tire shop. But I heard it could also be wheel bearings, and I have 106,000 on this. So I decided to do the wheel bearings. The challenge is it's not that old, so there isn't a lot of information out there on it. I searched for tundras. There's some how-tos, but there's some gotchas with this as well. So I just want to go through the gotchas with you, so when you do it, you have a little better idea. Number one, when you're taking off the wheel bearing. So this right here, this is the wheel bearing, okay? Sits on there like that. Don't try to bang these off. Okay, you're not going to be able to do it. Well, you can. I did it. But A, you're going to just mess this up. And then B, it's really hard to get in there and it's really stuck. So what you need to do is you need to get a bearing puller. See, you got to go pretty big. So this is a 10-ton. I would highly recommend getting one of these. I actually got them out without this, but it is really difficult. You can wreck a lot of stuff. So I would recommend getting one of these. This one, it didn't really fit, so I put a bolt in there, and then I got it to fit. So get yourself a wheel bearing puller. Number two, I see guys telling you you can put a nut on here and bang on this axle. You see this axle here actually pushes back. Don't do it. I put the nut on here, banged on it, I stripped the axle. So I ended up having to replace this axle. Replacing the axle is actually easier than getting this wheel bearing off. So wheel bearing puller, make sure you're not banging on this. Use the wheel bearing puller. You'll keep your axle intact. Changing the axle is actually not that tough. It actually just knocks out from the backside. And what I had to do there is pull off this upper, on this knuckle, had to pull off this upper bolt and then swing it out. So you get this off. Number two is make sure this in here, this is entirely clean. So there's a wheel sensor that goes in here. That's another thing I would do. A lot of guys just unplug that wire, take out the whole wheel sensor, okay? Just put it up out of the way. And then when you put this back together, you make sure this is absolutely clean. I put it all back together. We drove up to the cabin. On the way back, I had 2 wheel sensor errors. So I ended up having to get a scanner and reset them. It turned out it wasn't the wheel sensors, thank God, because those are $200 a piece. It was this getting this clean. Here's another gotcha. I bought a refurbished axle and they paint this. Well, that paint starts to come off and that gets stuck in there. So if you get a refurb axle, get that paint off of there before you put it together. Once it's together, you do not want to be taking it apart again. Another gotcha on this. This is the Doorman wheel bearing. I tried to put this together and there were some little pieces of the casing on the bolt threads. It made it a heck of a time to try and thread in there. Make sure there's no casing on those. They're clean before you put them in there. And if you're working in a storm, make sure you're inside. So that's about all I have for gotchas. I'm sure there's other ones. It's definitely a job. Quadruple the time you think it's going to spend. And I hope this helps. I hope you find it. Seems like these days when you search, you get a lot of advertisements and people selling parts, but hopefully this can help you out. Hey guys, one more thing I'd like to add on this 2012 job on the wheel sensor. I had a heck of a time figuring out the theory of operation on this, so I just wanted to explain how this wheel sensor. And I'm not going to be able to fit it in there because I have my rotor, my caliper tied up there. But what happens is that wheel sensor will sit in a hole right in here, and it goes up and it will ride just off of this axle right there. And that's why that's got to be clean, because it sits in there, back in there through a hole, and then it rides on that axle. So you don't want to be putting any grease in there or anything, because it's going to get on this axle face here, and then it's going to throw an error. So you want to make sure those don't get, damaged, the cable or that sensor, and then you want to make sure that's all clean. Okay, one more thing I'll add on this job is this is definitely a medium to high mechanic knowledge for this job, because there's things you're going to run into. So the threads there, you're going to make sure those are really clean. And like I said, I got some filament in there, and I just got this is a 12 millimeter by 1.25 is the threads on that. So that's another thing. It's pretty hard to find unless you have a Toyota service manual on what those threads are. So, that's kind of nice to have just in case you want to clean it up. Make sure you blow everything out of there. That way when you put the bolts in on the wheel bearing, they slide in there.